for those of you who are joining us today and those who might be seeing this recording after the event. My name is Isamar Vega. I am hosting this workshop, Blank Page to Clear Outline, Get Unstuck on Your Personal Essay. Hopefully you're here for the right workshop. And if not, you're welcome to stay, obviously. Okay, so we're just gonna go ahead and get started. So first off, I want to hear in the chat if you can post an emoji that best represents how you're feeling about college applications right now. I kind of want to see how you guys are feeling, where you guys are at. I know it can be either a really interesting time, a really stressful time, worrisome, confusing, or maybe you're not. Maybe you're enjoying the process. I'd love to hear how you're doing that. So you can post that in the chat. You should be able to post, I think, an emoji, or I guess you're only limited to a couple of emojis. But I think if you have a right click or a double tap, you should be able to see the emoji symbols and not be limited to what the system provides. No feelings. You guys have no feelings about the college apps, is what I'm getting. Joshua, yeah, that I very much remember having those feelings of just exhaustion. Or I don't know if that's how I'm interpreting the exhaustion, frustration, the overwhelm, maybe happy to get through it, maybe some fun parts, and kind of seeing how your story comes through. Anyone else have any immediate reactions about how they're feeling about emojis? Hitting a wall? Is that what that is? Exactly. Okay, I'm glad that I'm interpreting your emojis correctly. Samantha, is that what that is? Hitting a wall? Confusion? All right. It sounds like you're a little bit shy. Hopefully, that'll change a little bit as we go along. Okay. So thank you for those of you who shared. It definitely gives me a sense of how college admissions hasn't changed fundamentally about how it feels for students. All right. So first, this is what the workshop is going to, what you can expect from today's workshop. I'll give you a little bit more details on my background, so you know who's talking to you, who's giving you this advice. Just a framework to think about how to consider the essay, and then we're just going to dive in. We're going to cover 3 exercises. It's very much going to be an exercise. It's not just me talking at you or giving you tips. I hope you're ready to engage with them. And then we'll talk about some next steps that you can take after getting to the point of developing your outline. And then if time allows, we will do a Q&A. This workshop is scheduled for about 1 hour and 15 minutes. There's a good chance that we might end up using that whole time. I'm hoping that we can get to the Q&A in the end. But again, the priorities, I really want to give you the time that you'll need for the exercises. And I'll touch upon what I mean by giving you the time that you need in just a bit. All right, so first off, introduction. Sorry, I'm seeing a bit of a delay on my end as I'm switching the slides. 1 second, bear with me. Okay, there we go. All right, so hello again. I'm Isamar. I'm Isamar. I am an admissions coach. I have a background working in admissions. I was an assistant director of admissions at Stanford. I was there for 4 years. And then afterwards, I worked for several years as an admissions consultant working with students from really all over. So really my experience comes from both ends of the admissions experience of being the one evaluating applications, but also working with students to help develop profiles and craft their applications in ways that were ultimately successful and got them at schools that were really good fits for them. Education-wise, I went to Harvard for undergrad and for my master's degree, and then I went to Oxford for an MBA. So you can tell I really like learning, I really like school, and have been through the admissions process myself several times. I was a first-generation college student. My parents didn't go to college, so I didn't really get much support. And not, I barely had internet part of the time. So I actually didn't have a lot of help on this process. And there was a lot of figuring out things on my own. And that's part of why I very much appreciate the chance to do these workshops that cost you $0, so that other people who maybe have limited access to support can also get really quality help during this crucial part of your education journey. All right. All right, just a couple of disclaimers. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of a lag here. So just a couple of disclaimers for this workshop. Again, this is focused primarily on writing the personal essay for the Common App. Of course, it can apply to other university applications that might be using a different a different prompt. A lot is applicable, but that's kind of, I just want you to know that that's the thinking behind this process. So, for example, schools that don't accept the Common App, or don't have a long personal essay, instead a bunch of short essays, this might not necessarily be the focus of it. Of course, there's a lot of the work exercises that can be modified based on your needs. This is also, again, focused on high school seniors, so students who are currently thinking about applying to university in the next couple of months. So if you're here looking for advice for applying to grad school programs, this is probably not going to be the best fit for you. Again, there might be some strategies that are helpful here just for ideation process, but I just want to make sure that everyone understands what the focus of this workshop is. Another point is the applicability. These exercises might be applicable to different students based on their needs. It might not be as helpful to you depending on where you are in the process. And again, if something doesn't apply to you, that's okay. You can adjust it as needed or focus on the parts that do. These aren't the only ways to work on your essay or come up with ideas or create outline. They're just the ones that I chose that have worked well with the students that I worked with. And it's something to get you started. And again, there's no guarantee of any admissions results. Any admissions coach who's worked with students and, who has a really high value of ethics and integrity will not guarantee the admissions results, because this is a very, there's a lot of factors that go into this process. But my goal, again, is for you to feel like you have that support to get started, to eventually write an essay that you're really proud of. That hopefully, again, will get you to the point of getting a really great admission result for the schools that you're excited about. Okay, and so finally, this is a workshop, which means that you're going to get the most out of it if you put in the work. So if you're just sitting there listening, trying to get the tips and do it for later, or you're not going to get as much out of this time period. So really, I suggest you get a pen or pencil and a piece of paper out if you prefer that, or else get a Google Doc or Word doc out so that you can actually work throughout this time period. After I introduce each exercise and I'll give you examples, I'll give you a few minutes to be able to apply those as needed, to apply those exercises and work on them and work through your ideas. You won't have to share any of them with anybody. I'm not going to ask you to share anything in the chat. It's really just for your eyes only, but I do highly recommend that you don't just sit and watch, but if you're in a space where you are able to actually work through these exercises. If you find that these exercises are not a good fit for you, or you're a little bit more advanced in your essay by now, then feel free to just use this time for working on your essay, progressing in your own way. If you already have the hours set apart, so might as well use it as set time to make that progress. Think of it as like a study period. All right, and then just my goals for you, right? So, sorry, I don't know why this keeps going ahead, or not going ahead as it should. All right, sorry, bear with me while I switch out the, I switch out the presentation again. Sorry, technical difficulties, unfortunately. It looks like some of the points I was making are not being shared. For those of you who might have joined after we started, it'd be great to see what, I had folks share in the chat what emojis that they're feeling right now about the admissions process. So feel free if you feel like venting or sharing in emoji form, you can do that while we start this presentation. I just want to make sure that all the points are coming across quickly or are coming across appropriately. 1 second. Okay. Okay. Should be working now. Let's hope that it's 6 this way. Okay, so by the end of this workshop, my goal for you is to have an idea for your personal essay so that you'll know what you're going to write about, and an outline. So you have your you'll be part of the way there to be able to get to your first draft of your essay, and if not that, at least something on the page. The reason I created this workshop because I worked with a lot of students who really get stuck, right? They think that they have to come up with this perfect idea. There's some perfect idea out there that they haven't come up with, or they have too many ideas and can't figure out which one to choose, or if they have an idea, they are just unsure how to take that idea and make it into some sort of structure for your essay. So really my goal here is to get you unstuck, right, and get you writing, get you floating, and be able to help you recognize where's the value and the interest in your story so that you get to the point that you're excited to then write that first draft. All right. So quickly before we begin, though, I do want to hear a little bit about where you are in the process of writing your personal essay. It'll help me get a sense of maybe if I need to add more time or less time to each of these exercises um, so that maybe there's a different distribution here. Maybe you're all in the same place, and we can see where everyone is at. So if you can, you either scan this QR code, or you can go to slido.com, put in that number there, and then you're gonna be able to have that chance to take a quick poll, and see and tell us where you're at right now. I'm also going to include the link to it directly in case you aren't able to access the Slido poll. Okay, I see one person was able to go in. You can also click the link there, and that should take you, that I just put in the chat, and that should take you to the Slido result. Or sorry, the Slido poll is what I mean. Okay, I have a couple people in. I have like 7 people in this group, so I'd love to see what the other 5 of you, where are you at in your process of writing this essay? All right, so far, half of you have already started a first draft, right? So you're a little bit further ahead in this process. A quarter of you are still brainstorming ideas, so I think that'll be a good benefit of the first 2 exercises to get to that point. And a quarter of you are still deciding between a few possible topics. Okay, so it's pretty mixed. Devin, you're sharing that you haven't started yet. Okay, so hopefully you'll all find value in all of these different 3 exercises. But of course, if you find one that is of more value, or you're waiting for one over the others, then feel free to work on the exercises that will help you get unstuck from where you're at. Okay, and then I have one more poll. Okay. So now I want to hear like what you think is keeping you stuck wherever it is that you just shared in the process. So for those of you who are at the first draft, but you're here, so you must be feeling stuck in some way. So I kind of want to hear what that is. For those of you who are still deciding your ideas, why do you feel you can't stop, you can't choose, or why do you feel you haven't started? And again, I'm going to put this link to the direct poll in the chat. Let me know if for whatever reason it's not active, but it should be. Okay, should definitely be active now. All right, don't have still waiting for responses here. So let me know, what do you think is keeping you stuck in writing your personal essay or progressing wherever it is that you're at? So this one you have to rank your top two reasons because I know sometimes it's not just one reason. All right, so I'm getting the biggest one right now. Oh, it's changing. Is I don't feel confident in my writing skills is the top one so far. The second one is I feel overwhelmed and I don't know where to begin. And then third is I'm struggling to connect my ideas to bigger purpose or theme. I'm still waiting for a couple of responses. So the others of you could either go into the slide or click the link that's in the chat. I'd love to hear what you think about what you think is keeping you where you're at right now. No, feeling this is a bit of a shy group. It must be the Friday end of the week. I'm hoping. Okay, yeah. So I can definitely see how like sometimes you don't feel confident in your writing skills, and that keeps you stuck, right? Because you're questioning yourself, you're questioning everything that you're writing. I'll address this a little bit more towards the end. But honestly, like the worrying about the writing skill, that's like a layer problem. Right now, it's really just the important thing is getting your idea and getting something on the page. With feeling overwhelmed, don't know where to begin. Well, you're in the right place. This is where I'm going to walk you through step by step how to get out of the overwhelm and give you a place to begin. And connecting to your bigger ideas, to your bigger purpose or theme, that is also something that we'll address, right? And that's going to be one of the first exercises that we do. So you can start that from the very beginning. So start with the bigger idea, the purpose, of theme, and then identify the story that will help reveal that. All right. With that being said, I hope that you guys have again paper, pen ready, or a document, Word doc, Google Doc, whatever it might be, so that you guys can engage and have your ideas set and have something to work off of after this workshop. Okay, so first, just thinking about the personal essay. I'm not going too much into this in detail with this because assuming by now you already have a good sense that the personal essay matters a lot in the admissions process. It really helps show what you're about, right? Beyond your academics and activities list that you took, right? So I like to think of the application almost, if you think of it as a house, the academics are like the foundation that they can create, they have to be really solid, right? For whatever the college's standards are going to be. But ideally, everyone has a good foundation. So then you have your activities list, your honors, the things that you do, and those are like the beams. They guide the structure of what that house is going to look like. They suggest how it's going to look, but you're not really going to be sure until you see the walls and the roof and the decor and how it's painted, what kind of details are added on. And again, the same foundation or activities can end up with the house or an essay that looks very different depending on, you know, whether you chose wood or brick or pink paint or blue paint or added gables or not, right? They're really what makes the essays are what make your application look really interesting, really inviting, and give it character, right? And so that's why admission officers will often say, like, we want to know a little bit more about who you are, right? Because it's not going to be easy to tell just from your activities or from your essay. Um, sorry, there was one more thing here. Yeah, so it's really, it's your chance to share, like, what do you think about, how do you think about it, what drives you, and what matters to you, which even that is sounds really high level. So my goal through this process is to how to make that process of identifying like what you think about and how you think about it and what drives you, how to break it down into more actionable, accessible steps. All right, so this is going to be your first exercise, which is really focused on just generating ideas. So this exercise by the way, is not the only way to generate ideas. As I mentioned before, there's also different ways that you can do that. I'm just choosing one that I found effective with working with students. I used it even, in this admission cycle. And again, it helped because it's starting with things like values, core values. It's already inclined to help you think of ideas that are going to be related to what matters to you, to the purpose, to larger things. Okay. So first we're gonna have, we're gonna identify your values, and I kind of want to hear from you, like, how would you define a value? Like, what is it? Can you write in the chat if you feel up to it, how you would define what a value is? Any takers? Impact. Are you saying that impact is a value, or you identify value as something that is impactful? Samantha, yeah, that's a kind of a really good description of what a value is. Something meaningful that you live by day to day. Something that identifies what is important to you, what matters to you, what you care about. And so sometimes, in the shop will say, we want to know what matters to you, what's important, like what are your values. But oftentimes it's something that people don't think about. At least when I was in school, it's not something that I was thinking about. Like, what are my values? When I was just worrying about like plugs and academic papers and things I had to do. Joshua, I saw that you said it's the things that you base your life on right now. Yeah, it can be. It's like what do you find is important to your life, and how do you want to live it, and how do you live your life according to those values that you state. So 1 second. So I don't know why this keeps going the other way. Oh, all right. So what we're going to do first is identify your core values. So those things that really matter to you. Now, there's probably lots of different values that matter to you. But for the purposes of this exercise, we want to start refining and being specific and focus on just a couple that are going to be your top ones, right? So what's going to happen is in the next slide, you're going to see the same list of values, but zoomed in so you can read them all properly. This is not the only list of values out there, and there's tons more values. There's lots of other lists that you can use as a source. I just like this one. This one's from the New Happy, because they categorize it in a way that helps you see how different values might fit together. Um, so what you're going to do is I'm going to give you 2 minutes to read through all of these values. And as you're reading, write down the top 10 that resonate the most to you. Okay, and I'm only giving you 2 minutes in this time because I want it to be a gut reaction for you. I don't want you to overthink it. Just really go with the ones that resonate the most to you, that speak the most to you, ones that like seem obvious to you that those are values that are important to you. Okay, so all right, I'm going to give you 2 minutes starting now. And you finish before that, just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you're finished, and then we can move on to the next slide. You really should have put the Jeopardy music on here. All right, you have about a minute left. 30 seconds. All right, that's 2 minutes. Give me a thumbs up if you have 10 values written down. Joshua, thanks for sharing. Consciousness, self-discipline, altruism, nature, determination, fairness. By the way, you don't have to share your values, but if you want to, in the chat so you can see what everyone else is thinking, that works. And again, there's no right or wrong collection of values. It just really has to be the ones that speak the most to you. Okay. All right. So next step. So here's an example again that I'm just sharing you. Like this is an example of 10 different values that you'll see some that might be similar, some that resonate, some that are like extensions of the same value. There's no right or wrong way to go about it. All right. So now the next step, now that you have those 10 values, is you're actually gonna cut out 5, right? And this is to give you to those like top 5. Again, because you can do these exercises with 10, it just might be a lot and overwhelming. So I want you to focus on just which ones are out of those 10, which ones are the 5 that are undeniable, like you can't eliminate them, and which ones are ones that maybe they fit into another one under the umbrella of a different value that you chose, and that'll help you eliminate them. So I'm going to give you a minute for that again, because this is going to just focus on your gut. So I'm going to give you more than a minute, so you have to be a little ruthless in cutting down. Okay, so go ahead, you have a minute now to go and choose your top 5. And then once you get to those top 5, just give me a thumbs up to let me know that you're done. All right, 20 seconds. Joshua, thank you for giving me a thumbs up. Appreciate the engagement in the chat. Seeing a few more thumbs up coming in. And we're at the minute mark. All right. All right, so we got to those top 5 values. Daniela, if this will be recorded, yes, this is going to be recorded. It is being recorded. And then it'll be available on YouTube for about a week for free before it's added to the Leland Plus library, which you can also access as a via trial. Okay. So here's an example of, sorry, I keep pressing the wrong. The clicks. I need to click. Okay, so here's an example of, in this case, like this example, right? How you eliminate 5 values, because in this case, this person decided that these are the top 5 for them: choice, compassion, wonder, community, and boldness. Okay. So next step that we're going to do is we're going to actually have you define those values, right? And these are not going to be dictionary definitions. They're going to be your own, because ultimately, like, a value is just a word unless you put some sort of meaning behind it. But the only meaning that matters in this case is your own meaning. So how are we going to have you define those values? So what you're going to do is, whether you're on paper, on a doc, I want you to create a table. And you're going to start off like this. So it's going to be 4 columns and 6 rows. And on the first column, you're going to list each of those 5 top values that you ended up with. And the next column, you're going to tell it what this value means to you. And so what you're going to do then is, I'm going to give you, I'm starting with 3 minutes, but you might need a little bit more time than that. But I'm going to give you the time. We'll start with 3 minutes and let me know where if you need more time. And I want you to write your own definition of what that value means to you. Okay, so don't look it up like on the internet. Don't look up Webster definition or Oxford Dictionary, any of that. Just really in your mind, like in your heart, in your mind, in your life, like how would you define that particular value? Okay, so to give you a sense of that, in this case, I chose a word boldness, right? So top five values, boldness is one of them. And again, it can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So it can mean maybe it's about taking daring actions, right? Being bold in that sense, or it could be something more specifically about risk taking. It can be about speaking up for yourself, or it can be simply initially about wearing bold colored clothing so that you stand out, right? Maybe that's your meaning, right? Any of these could work. We're really just I just wanted to give you a sense of how um, a value can mean something different to different people, and how you phrase it. Again, they can still be aligned, but there's going to be subtle differences. Okay, so go ahead and I'm going to give you. Here's an example again of what these definitions might be like. Again, these are not dictionary definitions. They're just something that are very individual to the person. So feel free to read through these if you need it, to get a sense of how to think about your values. But I'm going to give you 3 minutes starting now. If you have enough, if that's enough time for you, give me a thumbs up and you're done. Otherwise, we'll check it at 3 minutes, see where you're at, and if you need a couple more minutes, we can do that. Okay. So I'm giving you 3 minutes to write out your values in that second column starting now. I have just under 2 minutes. Right, you have about a minute left. All right, Samantha, you're giving me a thumbs up. As you guys wrap up, let me know if you are also wrapping up, or let me know in the chat if you need a little bit more time. You still have about 30 seconds. All right, that's 3 minutes. Give me a thumbs up if you're wrapped up, or let me know if you need another minute or two. Okay, it looks like maybe some people might still be working. Or I'm not hearing. Folks, if you're still here, let me know in the chat if you're still working on this or you're all set. All right, I'm getting another thumbs up. Thank you, Aditi. All right, so I'm not getting requests for more time, so I'm gonna move forward. All right, so if you win this exercise, that means you already have something on the page to work with, right? Which is a good start. That was my goal for this workshop. Okay, so next step. All right. So now we're going to reflect further, right? This defining your values was the initial point of the reflection, but really it's just the starting point, right? We want to have you start thinking about when you actually live these values, because again, values are just words or ideas, and they really become real when you live them, or even when you don't live them. So now what you're going to do is in that same table in the last two columns, the first one, you're gonna write at the top, what is a moment that I lived this value? And then the last column, you're gonna write a moment that you did not live this value, right? And this is intentional, right? Because sometimes we think your values are ones that you live, but also sometimes you can get a lot of really interesting stories and insights about about what your values are when you realize you didn't behave in a way that you would have liked to, or that you thought you would have, or in a way that you idealized, right? And you can learn a lot from those experiences and have a lot of things to reflect from. So what you're going to do then is go through each of those values that you have listed, and for each one, write down very briefly, just a few words or a quick sentence. What was a moment that you lived that value that you can remember from your life, and what is a moment that you didn't live that value? I'm going to give you a little bit more time for this, so about 5 minutes or so. And again, if you do need more time, that's fine. Also, if you don't get to all of them during this workshop, that's okay. The point is just to get something to get you started and get that momentum going. So what I have here is just I filled out just these examples so you can see one, the types of different stories that you can come up with, and some of them might seem big moments, and some might seem minor moments but still have a lot of meaning behind them. So for example, here we use the example of boldness earlier. Moment a student might have lived this value is when they decided to speak up at a school board meeting about how school was funding sports but not arts in the same way. And maybe a moment that they didn't live that value is when they didn't follow through with an idea that they had to do a petition to take to this board meeting, right? And maybe they thought that they weren't being bold. So I have this as an example of how the same value can relate to a similar story in different ways. And maybe sometimes this brings up connections of how you can connect a whole story through either multiple values or through different sides of it, right? Like already this could be an essay where they start off how they didn't live that value, and then they learned from that, regretted it, and decided to live it in a different setting or at a later point in time. Sometimes you'll find that stories might align with multiple values, right? And that's also a different way to approach it, right? How use one story to talk about multiple values. So for example, like an example of choice, right? When, let's say, the student decided to pursue like an art specific path at their high school as opposed to the engineering path that they were being expected to do, that was a way of them affirming their choice to, their value of making their own choices for themselves and being responsible for them, because ultimately she was going to be living that time in school, right? But that could also be a way of behaving in a bold manner, right? It's a story that could potentially work for both values, here. All right, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes to give you a little bit more time to think through some of these moments in your life. Ideally, there would be stories that relate to your high school experience, but they don't have to be. obviously there's experiences in your life that might have been really momentous, that happened, when you were a kid, and they have had an effect on your life now, and that's okay as well. But just sometimes to think about, it might be easier to think about an impact of something that happened much more recently. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes, starting now. And again, give me a thumbs up if you finish before then, or if you find that you need a little bit more time, let me know in the chat. Okay, and if questions are popping up or you're feeling stuck, feel free to ask those in the chat as well. Okay, starting in 5 minutes now. All right, you have just under 4 minutes. All right, you have 3 minutes. All right, you have 2 minutes. All right, you have 1 minute left. Just under 30 seconds. All right, so that's 5 minutes. Give me a thumbs up if you're all set, or let me know if you need another minute or so in the chat. I have a couple of thumbs up. All right, other folks are being a little quiet. All right, I'm gonna take that as we're okay to move on then. Thank you, those of you who are being responsive in the chat. Okay. All right, so that means you should now have 10 different essay topic ideas, which is great. That was where I wanted you to be at. Am I forgetting something? Okay, so I want to hear, what was your favorite value that you've written about so far that you chose? Or is there a value that you selected that surprised you, that you didn't realize, you weren't really aware that that was a value that you held? Share in the chat if you're open to sharing that. This is a very this is a very quiet workshop. Okay, it seems like you guys are shy, which is okay. And maybe maybe still, there's a lot that we're covering, so maybe there's one that you don't. Adaptation, Joshua. Thank you for sharing. Adaptation, yeah, that's something that is a really important value, right? To be able to adapt to changing circumstances or to situations or to things that you're facing. Super important. Thank you for sharing. All right, 2 second chances again. Yeah, like having second chances or giving second chances to people. Yeah, that's important, right? Like everybody's living for the first time and growing and learning. Anyone else want to share a value that surprised you, or one that was your favorite? Integrity. Is that your favorite or one that surprised you? Favorite. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I mean, integrity is super important, right? To have that, and I'm gonna be curious to hear what that means to you, because it can be um, different things to different people, right? So like it can be anything from obviously living by your values, like having that sort of integrity, or sticking by your word, or it can be almost a sense of like being integral, like everything that you're doing and saying aligning, right? Which sort of like a different approach to think about it. Thank you for sharing. It's nice to hear that there's people on the other end of um, these these boxes where I can't see your faces. Okay, so now we're going to move on to selecting your topic, right? Because you have 5 different values by now, ideally 10 different stories or related stories that you can potentially write about. Again, you don't have to be limited to this. If you want to keep doing the previous exercise with the other top 10 values that you had instead of just the top 5 to generate more ideas, you can of course do that. But right now we're going to focus on these that you have right now in front of you. Okay, so how do you go about selecting your topic? Well, one, you can just go with your gut. Like if there's one particular story that emerged that you really love, that you feel like you have an urgent need to write, you can go ahead with that. You don't have to go through any additional like processes. But this is meant to help those of you who have ideas where you just don't. You either have multiple ideas that you really love, or you just think that they're very similar or equivalent. And this is going to give you a few criteria or factors to consider when deciding which one to use. And for those of you who prefer more of a quantitative or a mathematical approach, I try to add a little bit of that to the process. So what you're going to do is you're going to create another table, and you can either create a new one or just add rows to the one that you already have, or sorry, add columns. And what you're going to do is you're going to score 5 of your topics. So you should have 10 now, right? So about 10 different stories. Choose 5 of those. Again, if after this workshop, if you want to go and go through this process for all the 10 different stories, you can do that. Right now, because we don't have time, we're just going to focus on, five, or if you can get through scoring only three, then do three. And so what you're going to do is you're going to add those five additional columns, and each column is going to be for one different story. You can number your stories if you want, or you can just write like a keyword to remind you what each story is. And then you're going to read the reflection questions that are going to be on the screen. I'm going to share that in the next slide. And so for each reflection question, it's going to have you think about different considerations for each of these criteria. And then you're going to score them from 1 to 4. So 4 is excellent. It's that this story really fits this criterion. It's highly impactful. 3, it's like good, but maybe you can strengthen it in some way. 1, it doesn't really fully meet what you need. 1 is just poor, lacks impact or lacks clarity, or doesn't really fill that criterion at all. And so afterwards, you're going to have a score for each of these different 5 different criteria per story. You're going to add them up, and then that'll give you a number of which one might be the story for you to write, or at least narrow it down from 5 to 2 or 3. Okay, so I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I'm not sure if you'll need that, but again, same as before, give me a thumbs up when you're done, so I can know we can move on, or let me know if you need a little bit more time. So I'm going to give you just an example of what this chart looks like. I'm gonna leave that out for a second, just so you can see. Again, you don't need to copy the criteria reflection questions right now, but just make sure you add in the columns. And then this is an example of what it will look like. So these are the 5 stories that I chose from the same previous exercise. So school board story of the students speaking up at the school board. 1 is about choosing the arts path instead of engineering at her school. The other one is about, being nice to a new foreign exchange student. 1 is about, being part of the robotics team, even though they didn't want to be. Another one is doing art for nonprofits. So it's what you can do. Just give it like a code word, or number your stories if that's easier, and go ahead and rate each of these. So the 5 different criteria are authenticity and personal meaning. So that means, is this story something that is really authentic to you, that it's a genuine experience, that it's important to like who you are right now? Insight is more, is there enough in the story that you can share something about you learning about yourself, about going beyond the surface, about something that is a significant story that shows something about the way that you think, or things that are important to you, or how you changed. Memorability is this story something that is unique, that is interesting, that is a memorable story? Is it something maybe that you like to tell all the time? Relevance to values and goals, is it was it particularly relevant to values? Since this is already something that's based in values, it should probably be be related to it. But it's also, is it related to particular qualities that you want to emphasize for a particular university or types of schools that you are applying to? So like if you're applying to a school that really focuses on service, maybe that's something that you want to focus on a lot more, your personal essay. Or maybe you want to show more of your entrepreneurship qualities. And maybe it's not that the school has a particular vibe, but there's this, specific quality that you want to share about yourself. And the other one is emotional connection. Like, what are you going to share a story that's going to spark some sort of feeling in the reader? And it's not just emotional in a way of, feeling sad or feeling touched, right? It's also about excitement or surprise or laughter, or being inspired or being curious, right? That's what I mean by emotional connection. Like, just, you're going to make the reader feel something, whatever that something might be. Okay. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes, but again, you might not need that. So just give me a thumbs up when you're wrapping up, and we can move forward with the next steps after this. So I'm giving you 5 minutes starting now. All right, hearing from Samantha, you're wrapping up. Again, give me a thumbs up if you are able to score your stories sooner than that so that we can make sure we move forward. I want to make sure that we have time to get you guys through the outlines. All right, about 3 minutes. Again, give me a thumbs up if you feel like you've wrapped up. And getting another thumbs up here from Aditi. Just under 2.5 minutes. All right, about 1.5 minutes. All right, there's about a minute left, but I do want to move forward because I'm being mindful of the time. So if you still need to work on this, feel free to obviously keep working on it on your own pace as I'm talking. So what you should have now is ideally you should have a clear idea of which is your top story to focus on, right? So that could be the topic that you selected. Of course, some of you might find that there's either multiple stories that have the same score that you feel could work, or you might find that there's two or three that are close close in terms of your total point score, and you're still not sure or are convinced by the scoring that which one you should focus on. So just a couple of other reflection questions to consider um, to help you decide on that final topic. So one is just, as I said before, if there's just one particular story that you're more inclined to write about, that you're excited to write about, that you feel like would be easier for you, that you could go with that one. If there is a story, especially if you happen to evaluate all 10 of the different ideas, if there's a particular story or experience that you happen to reference more than once, whether across values or on different sides of the same value, if there's multiple stories or moments that are connected by some sort of similar theme, or one that you can take in different directions, or if there's a topic that aligns more specifically with your academic or extracurricular interests. It doesn't have to be aligned to that, but sometimes if you're just really not sure which one you choose, sometimes that gives you a little bit more focus and direction. Um, and again, like ultimately, you can write a good story, a good personal essay um, about anything, right? It's just about taking the right approach and being thoughtful and making sure that it has enough substance to it that you can really reflect and pull back layers to show, your insights and your perspectives and how you grew. All right, so that means by now you should have an idea about what your essay will be about if you went through this process completely. And if not, at least have narrowed it down to a couple of really great choices. So I want to hear from you. Do you have a topic that you're excited to write about? Like yes or not yet, or maybe you're sure. I'd love to hear how this process has been for you right before we get into getting into the outline. So let me know in the chat if you feel like you have something that you can write about now. Thumbs up from Devin. Yes. Okay, that's good. That's good feedback. All right. So being mindful of time, I'm going to move on to the next final exercise. Um, creating an outline. Ooh, I'm not sure what just happened. Okay. So creating an outline. Really, before you create an outline for your essay, it's really good to make sure you understand what your essay is going to be about and what is going to be the big lesson or takeaway from your essay topic. So that's actually where we're going to have you start. Is I want you to write in one sentence only, like what is your essay about? In another sentence, what is the main takeaway or lesson that reveals either what you learned or how this moment shaped you. I'm going to give you about a minute for this. Again, I want it to be just instinctual, very gut, very focused on your gut. You can obviously elaborate this or go and adjust this once you go back to this after this workshop. But for now, I'm going to give you a minute to write this out in one sentence. As you guys do that, Samantha, you said, I feel like I have something good to write about, but not confident about the topic. Well, I'd be curious to figure out like what is you think it's good, but you're not confident about it. So where is that worry come from? Is it just how you're? Is it just you don't trust the topic? Again, like the topic is just you can write about anything for personal essays. Really, it's just about making sure that you are very thoughtful about it. Hopefully, as you get through the outline, we can talk about like how you can add a little bit more nuance to it. Oftentimes, it's a matter of making sure that you share like personal insights or reflections that are going beyond the norm or going beyond the obvious. And sometimes that might be a more matter of how you talk about it, right? Or how do you bring out the interest or the excitement in the story. But really, it's like if you feel like it's something good that you would like to write about it, then that's fine. Joshua said, yes, we haven't started yet. It's kind of difficult to define the essay. What do you mean, Joshua, about defining the essay? Like by figuring out, is it the same exact exercise of like, what is your essay about? So I'll ask some clarification. Like, what is your essay about is really just like exactly what you just wrote, basically elaborating on the ideas that we just talked through, like the ideas that you generated, because we said we're just going to do a couple of notes. So that is a case, like what is this essay about? So I'll give you an example right here. So like, let's say, you saw on the chart before, I had the top two stories were about creating art pieces for nonprofits and speaking up at the school board. And the art pieces for nonprofits actually had a higher score, but maybe the student who, had these experiences decided that they actually wanted to talk about speaking up at the school board instead, whether it's because they want to show that boldness or maybe how they weren't bold initially, so they'll combine a couple of the ideas that they had generated, and they'll use the art for nonprofit in a supplemental essay, right? Which is also something that you can use. Some of these stories, the ideas that you generated, if you don't use them for the personal essay, you can also use them for supplement essays, and that's a great part of doing these exercises and generating with lots of different ideas is that you can use them in other pieces of the application. So in this case, if I had to say it in one sentence, like what is the story about, or what is the essay about? If the student writes about speaking at the school board, it's, they would say my essay is about the time I spoke up about the lack of funding for arts at the school board, and that led me to create a proposal to increase arts programs. Like very simple, very straightforward, and that's just to give you a starting point and to help you focus as you're writing that outline and writing that first draft. And then if you had to think through like what is the main takeaway, so like what is the point of the essay, right? It's that the student learned that her voice has value, and if she wants to see change, it's her responsibility to speak up, and maybe if she does, other people will join you. Like that's what you're getting to, right? Because every essay should have a clear direction or a point that you are arriving at. Joshua, I see that you're saying it's difficult to define about the essays making your high school more ecologically responsible and looking for ways to help people in that path. I mean, that already seems like it's a pretty clear essay. Now it's just a matter of how do you write the structure for it, right? Is that what you mean? And maybe it starts with just starting with a basic how, like just taking it chronologically, which is what we're actually going to do next. Is like maybe for you it's about like starting with when you decided to be interested in the environment, right? Or with wanting to make your high school more ecologically responsible, like what did you see that sparked that interest? What steps that you took to help make that happen in concrete ways? And how did you start helping other people follow in the path? Like what did you do? Maybe it just starts with breaking it down simply, right? And maybe that whole path is your story, or maybe just part of that path is going to be your story. So what I would have you do next is, now that you have seen how you can come up with like one takeaway and writing out what your story is about, we can move on into creating the outline. So let me know if you have written out what in the one single sentence, like what your essay is about and what the takeaway is. Give me a thumbs up if you managed to do that as I was talking. All right, I'm getting a thumbs up. Sorry, I promised I was going to give you a minute, and then I was responding to Joshua. But I'm going to give you that. I'm giving you that minute right now to make sure you write that out. All right, I have another thumbs up. All right. So just taking a look at the clock. It looks like I'm going to run a little bit over. If you need to leave, that's fine. Again, this is going to be recorded, but I am going to make sure I take those of you who want to stay through the end of this workshop. Okay. So let's say by now you have that defined. You know what your essay is going to be about. You know what you need to arrive to. So next step is to actually create an outline. And where I want you to start is just start with 5 to 7 bullet points. Okay, shouldn't be a super extensive outline, something very high level. And you're going to jot down the brief moments that happened in that story in chronological order, because that's just the simplest way to start. Because of time, I'm not going to be able to do the full 3 minutes to give you time to do that. But of course, as I'm talking, if you want to start that process, go ahead and do that. Okay. So what I mean by that is like it's going to be in this structure. First, this is where you're starting, where you're at the beginning of this story. What is needed, context that is needed. Then you're going to say, then this key moment happened, and then this key moment happened. And then you were surprised because this happened, and then you reflected, and then this other moment happened. And then finally, this is how the story ends and what I learned, and this is what I reflected. Okay, so that's what I mean by doing a very brief outline, high level and chronological order, just literally what happened very simply. So the next step after that is, fleshing that out, right? So this is that same topic that I had before, which maybe it's the student, found out the school was buying new sports uniforms again, which they do every year for all the teams, but she barely has paint to use in her art classes, and all the other students are complaining that they don't have enough, enough tools or materials to use in their arts classes. And so she learns that this uniform proposal has to be presented for approval at the board meeting, and she decided maybe she should get other people to do a petition. But she was scared about doing that and going up to people and asking if they support her idea to get more funding for the arts programs. And then she was confused because she didn't know the rules about how to present to the board, but then decided to go to the meeting anyway, and suddenly felt this urge to speak when comments were open for everybody, and that surprised her. And then she was told that she should present her own proposal, and then that led her to go ahead and do that petition and also do a survey, create a proposal with the people, and then presented it and got approved. Right. It's very simple, very straightforward. It doesn't have to be anything. The point here is just to create structure, right? So you're going to come up with, you're going to take the idea of like what your essay is about and what the lesson is going to be and fill it in, right? Very simple. As I mentioned, the goal here is just to get that idea, that story from out of your head onto the page. So then what you're going to do is you're going to combine both of those pieces. So you're going to take what the story is about, right? And that's going to be something that ends up being like in the intro of your essay. It's going to be basically your thesis. And then you're going to have the rest of that outline. And then at the end, it's going to be what you learned. What is the main takeaway? What is it about? Because that's what you want with personal essays. It's not just a story. It's more of a personal reflection where you're sharing again, what you learned about your values, about what you care about your goals, about your purpose, or how you've changed, that sort of thing. So you can see I literally just combined what we had in the previous page. This is what this essay is about. This is the outline, and then this is that final takeaway. And you'll see here already, there's a very clear structure for how to write this essay, or how that narrative is going to be. And then so finally, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting, is you're going to play a little bit with the structure. There's lots of ways to structure essays. Sometimes you can take a more standard personal essay approach, be chronological, or you can work on where you want to start the essay in the story. Sometimes you can be more creative in your approaches. This is just to give you an idea of how you can tell the same story in different ways to add interest to it. So one is chronological, which we see lots of essays like this, and those can work very well. So just like what we said before, start to end. Or you could do something where you start in the middle of the story, right? So this point where you're saying, this surprising thing happened in the middle, you could actually start there, right? And then you back up to get to that point, and then you go explain the rest of what happened, or you can start at the end. So you can start at the end of the story and then again do the same thing back up, but instead you're going all the way towards the end. So just to show you a little bit about what I mean. So this is that same chronological outline before, and already this could be a structure for a really great solid essay. But if she were to start it in the middle, maybe she would start the essay, like the hook or the intro paragraph would be her reflecting on saying, I didn't plan to speak up when the time for comments opened up at the school board, right? And you're already like, wait, what do you mean? What happened? Like, why weren't you planning to speak up? You want to learn more, right? And that's what good interests do. They add interest and they make the reader want to read more. And then she backs up and explains everything that happened. And then she gets to that point in the middle when she surprised herself. And by this point, we'll know that context. And she'll share a little bit more about how she was feeling, why she surprised herself, and what she was advised to do next, and then what she did next. If she were to start at the end, maybe it's starting with like the shocking thing of the conclusion of like, where she's just opening up by saying, by the time I finished, this petition had 453 students or 453 signatures on it. There's no way the board would deny this, right? Again, it's to start it in an unexpected place, to add interest, to get you to read it. We already know that this is something that she got to at the very end, but now we want to see how she got there, right? And so then most of this stays the same until we get to this final point. And then it's not like she's going to repeat the exact same thing. She's just going to add more context in the conclusion of how she arrived to this particular point. And then again, obviously, conclude it properly after this point here. So now, once you go through this process, you should have an outline for the essay. I know some of you are probably still need to spend some time working on this. Sorry, I didn't anticipate some of the technical issues I was going to be with making sure the presentation worked properly. But I'm hoping that this was helpful to you in now having for sure something on the page. So you should have many ideas of what to write about for your essays. You should have selected, your top choice, your top, 2 or 3 choices at least, and know how to define your story and how to arrive to a lesson and how to create an outline for that personal essay, and how to adjust the outline so you can make sure the structure is interesting. I see this question, Aditi, should we start our essay with a straightforward question or rhetorical sentence? There's lots of different ways to start the essay. You can start it that way. You can start it with an anecdote. You can start with like a quote of, not a quote, but like something somebody said in your story. It can be a bold statement. There isn't a wrong or right way to do it. It really is just about what makes sense for you, the way that you express yourself, and also what makes sense for the story. So a couple of next steps, right? Because once you have an outline, you obviously have to get to that draft. Unfortunately, we're not going to have time for Q&A anymore. If you do have some questions, you can always reach out to me to set up an intro call. You can ask any questions that you have there. But I will also be doing an event on the last Saturday of November, which is just going to be a Q&A event. So I definitely encourage you to register for that if you aren't already. And that's all I'm going to do for that hour is just answer questions. Okay, so how do you get from that outline to the essay? Well, first is to flesh out your outline. We started off with 5 to 7 bullet points, but obviously there's going to be subpoints for each of those. So that's the first thing that I have students do is just add what other points need to be added to get from one bullet point to the other. So any sort of key moment, and already that is going to get you a more fleshed out story. You should also identify like what is the main point or takeaway of each paragraph that you're gonna write. So every paragraph and really every sentence in your essay should have a purpose. Then you're also gonna go through that outline again and identify what are the key reflections or insights that you can weave in throughout the narrative. So you really shouldn't save all of your personal insights for just the conclusion. We want to see how you're growing or what you're thinking about, or what you're learning throughout the different parts of the essays. Sometimes it helps students to start with the second paragraph. I recognize that sometimes when you're going from outline, you want to start writing the full sentences. Sometimes people get stuck again when they're thinking, I have to really like lock down this really interesting intro first. But if that's going to stop you from writing the rest of the essay, then skip that for now and start with the second paragraph. And then go back to that intro paragraph or that hook sentence once you have the rest of it, because I'd rather have you have a more fleshed out essay and not feel stuck with the idea of having, a really interesting hook before you can write any of the rest of it. You don't need it first. You can go back to it later. And oftentimes it'll reveal yourself as you write out the rest of that essay. And finally, write a terrible first draft. Your first draft is not going to be good. That is okay. It's just sometimes you need something that is a terrible first draft. So you have something to make better, right? You're going to be able to sculpt it, to improve it, to figure out what you want to keep, what you can take out. Not everything's going to be relevant. Again, the important thing is just to get those initial ideas out there, and then you'll fix them. Honestly, like you just having these ideas already set, having an initial outline is going to make it so much easier to have that first draft. And it really is just a matter of taking that outline and your brief notes and thinking, how can I turn these into sentences that make sense and connect all of these different bullet points together? And overall, it's just really about like keep adding to your outline, and then eventually that first essay draft will reveal itself. And then once you have that first essay draft, you can start refining, pull out what is not necessary, figure out how you can say things more succinctly, more creatively, or more in your voice. But I know this is going to be a process. It's going to require a lot of iterations. I know with the students that I was just working with who just submitted their early applications, we went through multiple versions of their essays before we got to their final one. And sometimes their final essay looked very different from their first one. It's just a constant iteration, constant improvement. But you're not going to get to that final polished draft unless you write that terrible first draft. And this, I wanted to share here just this initial quote here from this author that is, it really speaks to that idea of you just need to get through that first draft, right? And it's not going to be good, and that is okay. And in this point here about the first draft is going to be bad. You just get it down. It's just exactly what I do as soon as you just need to get something down. Then the next draft we start fixing it up, and the third is like it might actually be good. That's when we start making it. Start fleshing it out, start polishing it up. It's probably going to be more than three, but hopefully seeing that this professional writer also takes this approach with their essay will give you the confidence to make sure you aren't stuck with the idea of perfectionism as you're writing that first draft. All right, so if you do want additional support with getting from that outline to that first draft and to that final polished draft, or if you just have questions that came up during this workshop that you didn't get to, feel free to set up an intro call with me. There is no expectation if you don't want additional support and you just want to do that 15-minute call. You're welcome to do that. And of course, if you do want additional support, that's a good way for me to better understand what support you need, for you to share a little bit more of where you're at in the process, and then we can figure out what makes sense for you in terms of getting that extra coaching. Couple of different ways I can support you. One is through either doing micro packages or session bundles. This is for students who want support with just one application or two applications, or really just one targeted support to work on crafting their essay. It's also a little bit more financially accessible than doing the full-on packages. You can also do an application review. So that means if you finish the rest of all of your application by yourself, but you just want someone to give that final look from that perspective of an admission officer, give you feedback on what's working and what might need to be improved and how to do that. That's also something that I offer for students. It's completely asynchronous, which means you just send me your materials, I review and send back essentially a written report. It's usually 3 pages, or at least 3 pages, but it's usually more like 4 to 6 pages. So I go pretty in depth with those. And then finally, if you do want more of a robust coaching package, so for more than 1 or 2 schools or much more hours to work on all of your essays, not just your personal essays, but also your supplement. You can also, that's also a way that I can support you. Again, you have to book those intro calls so we can figure out what makes sense for you, and also just learn more about my coaching style. I use a lot of frameworks and structures, but it's also very much customized. And when it comes to essays, I do actually review them and provide specific recommended edits or advice, or help you polish those essays so that it can be essays that you're really proud of and also fit in with the rest of your application. For this following week, I am offering a coupon or a discount for $200 off for any packages that are over $1,000. So it's 20% off right there. It's just available until next Friday. So if you do want to take advantage of that, I recommend you, 1, talk to your parents, and 2, book an intro call with me next week so we can discuss how you might be able to best apply that. And then just some final reminders, this recording is going to be available on YouTube, I believe, for about a week. I'll be sure to send a message when that link is available. Afterwards, it will be available on LeaveIn Plus. And if you don't have that already, you should be able to sign up to get a free trial and access this recording again if you want to go through any of these slides again. I'm also going to send a survey. It'd be helpful if you filled it out and let me know what worked in this workshop, what might need to be adjusted in the future, or if there's other topics you'd like me to touch upon in future events or workshops. That's super helpful for me to know if it makes sense for me to keep doing these events or not, and if you're finding value in them. And then finally, just remember, use that discount code before it expires next Friday. Again, I'm sorry I couldn't get to the Q&A this time. This is my first time doing this workshop with a group of people and not one-on-one. So definitely reach out if you have questions that you want discussed in that intro call. Otherwise, I will have an event on, it's the Saturday after Thanksgiving, which is all going to be Q&A, so you can get any of your questions answered during that session. All right, thank you so much. I'm glad to see that those of you who attended found this helpful. I really wanted to make sure I did something that was very practical and applicable and that you could work on to make sure that you feel like you're making progress in your essay. Thank you so much for joining, and hope you have a good rest of your weekend.